Hey, what's up? It's Taylor, and I have a lav mic this time to make my audio a little bit more bearable for you guys. My friend Lee suggested it. Thank you, Lee Tomaszewski, for suggesting the lav mic instead of just using the phone mic because it didn't sound very clear last time. So this video, what I wanted to do was teach how to sprout things like buckwheat, things like chickpeas, quinoa, amaranth, and the reason why you would do that in the first place. So we'll talk about the what, the why, and the how. So the what is sprouting. So what is sprouting? Well, sprouting is, you think of any plant, it starts off as a little seed and then gets put in the earth somewhere, water somehow gets to the seed and starts to germinate and then turn into a sprout, and then eventually turns into a plant. So that's what sprouting is. Essentially, that's all you're doing, is you're starting the sprouting process of these seeds, these nuts, these legumes. So why would you do that? Well, the reason why is because these are the reproductive parts of a plant. So you think about something like an apple, for instance, or a carrot, or a pear. These are things that are meant to be eaten, meaning like over however many millions of years, and these plants have evolved to make an appetizing looking fruit for animals like you and I to eat. And we're meant to eat the fruit. The fruit is delicious, and as nice as these plants are, they're not just making fruit for us to consume just because they're nice. They have an agenda as well, and their agenda is to spread their reproductive parts, their seeds, their nuts, their legumes. The fruit, delicious, it gives you energy, gives you nutrition, but the nut or the seed or the reproductive part of the plant is not meant to be digested. It passes through. So you think a deer eats a pear off a tree, gets all the nutritional benefit from the pear, the seed goes through the digestive system, and then, several hours later, leaves the deer, and the deer is off in the distance somewhere else, and eventually a new pear tree starts up. So that's a reproductive part of the plant, and the plant has evolved to have preventative measures in place so that the seed or the reproductive part of the plant doesn't get digested. Now, cooking can help with this process, right? So if you cook something, if you cook lentils, for instance, or if you cook quinoa, it's going to help the digestibility of these reproductive parts of the plant. But it's still, so there's a few things that are still, could be optimized, let's put it that way. So while you can digest quinoa when you cook it, there's something called phytic acid. So phytic acid, in a nutshell, no pun intended, it binds to things like manganese or copper or these microminerals, preventing you from absorbing them. So while quinoa might have a ton of these trace minerals in them, you're not going to necessarily get all of them because phytic acid is going to bind to these trace minerals, and then it'll leave you several hours after eating. So sprouting these parts of the plant can get you all of the benefits, the nutritional benefits of eating them by starting the sprouting process. So if you sprout quinoa, you're going to get all of the protein. You're going to get, most of the protein. You're going to get most of the trace minerals. You're going to get most of the nutrition involved in that quinoa that you're eating, instead of just partial the amount if you were just to cook it, let's say. So how do you sprout? Well, sprouting is actually really simple. It's dirt simple, no pun intended. So the way that I sprout is, it's kind of evolved over the last few years. I've tried sprouting jars. I've tried, all the things that you would buy in the store to like a sprouting kit, all that sort of stuff. And nothing works as well as this, especially if you're going to make large quantities like I do. I like to make a bunch of sprouts at once, and then I'm done with the week. So if you're going to do that, I have a trick for you. So I use bags just like this one. This is a little cloth bag. It's an eco-friendly bag. It's made actually here in Kamloops, I believe. I can't remember the name of them, and this is so old that the name's rubbed off. But essentially what you do is there are micro holes in these cloth bags that allow water to get out of them, but even things like amaranth, which is super small, to not leave. So you can put your amaranth in, or you can put your quinoa in, or buckwheat in, or whatever you're going to do, and then that is what you're going to sprout these things in. So how you start is you measure it out, of course. So measure out, let's say, for instance, this week I'm going to sprout 5 cups of quinoa and 5 cups of chickpeas.
All right, so unfortunately, my camera decided to give out, and therefore I can't really do any voiceover that mixes with the visuals. Well, I could reshoot everything, but if I'm being honest, I really just don't want to. So here I am, I'm gonna do some voiceover of what I'm doing. So I'm rinsing my quinoa here, as you can see, in slow motion. And what that does is it gets rid of this coating that's on quinoa called saponin. It's like this waxy, soapy coating that helps prevent insects from eating it. And it can make it taste bitter, and some people have a sensitivity to it. And then once it's rinsed, I hang it over top of my sink for about 30 minutes to drip dry. And you can see, and I'm also gonna do the same with the chickpeas. So chickpeas, I'm gonna dump them into a big pot, 5 cups, and I'm gonna rinse these under the sink as well. You just wanna make sure that there's no rocks or pebbles or stones or anything in there. Sometimes you'll find like little rocks or pebbles in with chickpeas and lentils and stuff. You just have to be mindful that there's none in there. And once they're rinsed, I'll push them to the side. I'll put the quinoa in as well, and then I'll fill the pot with filtered water. Once I've filled the pot with water and everything's soaking, I'm gonna put the pot in the fridge and I'm gonna leave it there for 8 to 12 hours, usually overnight. So I'll usually do this whole thing in the evening. And then I have this nifty little sieve, and the sieve I'm gonna place in the sink, and then I'm going to drop the chickpeas into the sieve and rinse them off. So again, I'll just give them a quick rinse, rinsing off the chickpeas that are soaked overnight. You'll notice that they're about twice the size now. They've soaked up a whole bunch of water. I'll do the same with the quinoa. I'll rinse it off as well once more, and then I'm gonna leave both to dry for another 30 minutes. And I'm just gonna repeat this process every morning and every night. So I'll rinse the quinoa in the morning, I'll rinse the chickpeas in the morning, put them back in the fridge for the day, and then I'll do it in the evening and I'll leave it overnight. And I'll usually do that for 2 or 3 days. In this case, I did it for 2 days. So you'll notice after here, this is 8 or 12 hours later, I'll come back and I'll rinse them off once more. So here we see the quinoa, and you can see it's starting to sprout. Actually, the quinoa is quite sprouted. You can see little tails forming on it. So this is what quinoa looks like when it starts to sprout. I'm gonna rinse it off once more and hang it up to dry. And then the chickpeas, normally they take a little bit longer to sprout, like 3, 4, 5 days sometimes. You see little sprouts here starting to form, but I only had these sprouting for, oh, here I am just dumping it all over my kitchen stove. Okay. So I'm gonna use about 2/3 of the water that you'd normally use to cook either quinoa or chickpeas. And the reason is because we soaked them overnight and then we sprouted them for a few days, so they're already completely saturated with water. So there's a lot of water content in these already, so we don't need as much to cook them. And then to cook them, I'll cook the quinoa for 10 minutes, I'll simmer for 10 minutes and then leave it sit for 5, and the same for the chickpeas. And then I'll just simply portion them out for my meal prep for the week if I'm making meal prep. You don't have to cook sprouts, you can eat them raw if you want. You can make sprouted bread from them if you have a dehydrator. You can do all sorts of things with sprouts. You can even just put them on salads, whatever you want to do. I just prefer to cook them. I like to add curries to them sometimes, or different spices. I just prefer them cooked. You don't have to cook them, I just like to. So that's how I sprout. It's super simple. It's a very passive process. The biggest part of the process is simply just the initial phase where you're rinsing and soaking, but other than that, you just rinse it a few times in the morning, in the evening for a few days, and then you have sprouts, and then you can either eat them raw or cook them. So as I said, my video cut out and my audio isn't really synced to anything, so I'm recording this without knowing what I'm gonna do for an outro. I think in my mind I'm gonna take a still from the video where it sort of looks like I'm waving, and then edit myself waving goodbye to you and thanking you for watching the video. I appreciate you watching, and if you enjoyed it, maybe leave a comment, and if you're gonna try it, let me know. And if you feel like someone could enjoy this video as much as you did, maybe share it with them on your Facebooks. Just share it on your Facebooks. All right, enjoy your day. Thank you for watching. Bye.